Temporary, she called it. A little rest, a place to get my strength back after the fall I took in the kitchen. The one that left my hip throbbing and my confidence shaken. 4 years. 4 long, echoing years. For birthdays celebrated with a slice of dry cake from the dining hall trolley. For Christmases watching other families embrace while I clutched a lukewarm cup of tea. For lonely springs observing the daffodils push through the manicured lawn outside a window that framed a life no longer mine. And not one single visit. Not one phone call that lasted longer than a hurried, guilt-laden minute. My daughter, Amelia, my only child, the one I'd poured my life into like water into a precious vase, had promised it was temporary. Then she'd systematically changed the locks on every door to my past, every pathway to my present, and effectively thrown away the key to my future, or so she thought. What Amelia, in her rush to tidy me away, didn't count on, what she'd so grievously underestimated, was that even a forgotten woman in a forgotten room, a woman dismissed as too old, too frail, too out of touch, still possesses a mind. A mind that remembers every broken promise, every saccharine lie. A memory that holds the deeds to a life of sacrifice, not just the deed to a house. And within that fading, dismissed vessel, there can reside a quiet, unyielding strength, the kind that gathers slowly, unseen, until it's strong enough to reclaim not just what's hers, but who she is. She thought she was managing a burden, she was about to discover she had awakened a force. Now, let me tell you what really happened. It wasn't as if I'd been a burden before, not really. After my beloved Thomas passed, a decade now it must be, I'd managed on my own. Our little bungalow, the one we'd bought with our youthful dreams and decades of hard work, was my sanctuary. I knew its every creak, its every sigh. My garden, though smaller than it once was, still bloomed with Thomas's favorite roses. My finances were modest, but I was careful. Amelia lived a town over, busy with her husband, Mark, and their increasingly demanding careers. Visits had become less frequent, more perfunctory, over the years. A quick stop on her way home from some important meeting, a rushed Sunday lunch where her phone buzzed more often than she spoke. I'd try not to mind. Children grow up, they build their own lives. That's the way of it. I'd tell myself she was stressed, that Mark's new promotion was demanding. I made excuses for the silences, for the forgotten birthdays that were acknowledged a week late with a generic card and a too bright, too false apology. The fall was a stupid thing. A rug, a misstep, a sudden, sharp pain that stole my breath. I lay there on the cold linoleum, the scent of spilled tea pungent in the air, for what felt like an eternity before I could reach the phone. Amelia arrived at the hospital looking flustered, her expression a mixture of annoyance and a carefully curated concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mark hovered in the background, checking his watch. "Oh, Mom," she'd sighed, we can't have this happening. You're not safe on your own anymore." That was the first time I heard the refrain, the one that would become the soundtrack to my displacement. The doctors said it was a hairline fracture, nothing needing surgery, but I'd need rest, physiotherapy. Amelia seized on it. "There's this lovely place, Mom, just for a little while, Rosewood Gardens. It's more like a hotel, really. They have wonderful nurses, and you can get proper rehab, just until you're back on your feet. Temporary, of course." Her voice was so earnest, her eyes so wide with supposed care. I was tired, in pain, vulnerable. The thought of not having to manage, just for a little while, was admittedly appealing. The bungalow suddenly felt too big, the stairs too steep, the silence too profound. "Are you sure, dear?" I'd asked. "It sounds expensive." She'd waved a dismissive hand. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mom. We'll handle everything. Mark and we just want you to be comfortable, to get better. We'll visit all the time. It'll be like a little vacation for you." A little vacation. The words echoed in my mind as she bustled about my bungalow a few days later, packing a small overnight bag for me, her movements efficient, almost impersonal. She'd chosen practical, drab nightgowns I rarely wore, a pair of sensible slippers, my favorite books, my knitting, the small framed photo of Thomas that always sat on my nightstand. These were deemed unnecessary for a temporary stay. Rosewood Gardens was beige. Beige walls, beige carpets, beige food. The smiles of the staff were professional, distant. My room was small, overlooking a meticulously trimmed lawn where elderly residents were occasionally wheeled out for a breath of fresh air. Amelia and Mark settled me in, their voices bright, their promises of daily visits still ringing in the sterile air. "We'll be back tomorrow, Mom, with some of your favorite magazines," Amelia chirped, kissing my cheek, her lips cool. Then they left. The first week, I waited. I'd get dressed each morning, put on a touch of lipstick, hoping to see Amelia's car pull into the driveway. A few phone calls came, brief, rushed. "Just so busy, Mom. Work is manic. We'll try for the weekend." The weekend came and went. Another excuse. A work crisis for Mark. A sudden migraine for Amelia. The magazines never materialized. The ache in my hip began to lessen, but a new ache, a deeper, more insidious one, began to grow in my heart. Temporary, she had said. But the days stretched into weeks, the weeks into months, and the word began to feel like the cruelest kind of lie, a silken cord slowly, inexorably, tightening around my hope. The initial weeks at Rosewood Gardens bled into months with a monotonous, soul-crushing regularity. My hip healed, the physiotherapist pronounced me mobile enough, yet Amelia's promises of taking me home remained vague, always deferred to an unspecified future date. Just a little longer, Mom, she'd say during her increasingly infrequent and brief phone calls. We want to be absolutely sure you're strong enough. And the bungalow, well, Mark thinks we should get a few things sorted there first. Make it even safer for you when you return. A few grab rails, maybe a ramp, just in case. Grab rails I didn't need, a ramp for a house I could navigate perfectly well before my fall. Her excuses were flimsy, transparent, yet delivered with such feigned earnestness that arguing felt exhausting, almost churlish. I was, after all, supposed to be grateful for their concern, for this lovely place they had found for me. My internal monologue became a relentless cycle of confusion, hurt, and a dawning, terrifying suspicion. I'd replay our conversations, searching for clues. For the moment the temporary stay had morphed into something more permanent in her mind. Had I missed something? Had I become such a burden that she couldn't even voice her true intentions? The memories of my sacrifices for her, once a source of quiet maternal pride, now felt like ashes in my mouth. The late nights I'd spent helping her with school projects, the treasured family heirloom I'd sold to fund her semester abroad, the countless times I'd dropped everything to babysit her own children when they were small, before they too grew distant, following their mother's lead. Had none of it meant anything? Was I so easily disposable? The coldness of Rosewood Gardens was a stark contrast to the warmth of my bungalow. Here, life was lived according to a schedule dictated by medication rounds and meal trays. The other residents, some sharp and witty, others lost in the fog of dementia, were a constant, poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities of age. Many had families who visited regularly, their laughter and chatter a painful echo in the long, sterile corridors. For me, there was only the ticking clock and the shrinking hope. I'd ask the nurses at the front desk, kind but overworked women, if they could help me dial Amelia's number. Sometimes the call would go straight to voicemail. Other times, Amelia would answer, her voice strained, her excuses ever more elaborate. "Oh, Mom, I was just about to call you. Such a hectic day. Leo has a soccer tournament all weekend, and Lily's got that science fair project. You know how it is." I did know. I knew I was being managed, placated, kept at arm's length. The sting of it was a constant ache. I tried to engage with the other residents, joining the weekly bingo game, attempting the gentle exercise class. But my heart wasn't in it. My world had shrunk to the four beige walls of my room, my only true companions the ghosts of my past and the specter of an increasingly lonely future. One afternoon, Mrs. Peterson from down the hall, a spry woman with twinkling eyes and a sharp wit, found me staring out the window, a half-finished knitting project lying idle in my lap. "Waiting for Godot, dear?" she asked, her voice laced with a gentle irony. I managed a weak smile. "Something like that, Elsie. Daughter trouble?" she probed, settling into the visitor's chair uninvited, as was her way. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Ah," she said, her expression softening with understanding. "It's a common ailment in places like this. They promise the world, then the world gets too busy for old mothers. Mine sends a fruit basket at Christmas, usually a week late, with a card signed by her assistant." Her candor, so unexpected, was strangely comforting. For the first time I didn't feel entirely alone in my predicament. We talked for a while that afternoon, Elsie sharing stories of her own children's benign neglect, her words awry, unpitying commentary on the casual cruelties of familial obligation. It didn't lessen my own pain, but it helped to know I wasn't the only one navigating this particular brand of heartache. The bungalow, my home, became a distant, dreamlike memory. I'd close my eyes and try to conjure the scent of my roses, the feel of Thomas's worn armchair, the comforting clutter of my sewing room. But the images were fading, overlaid by the relentless beige of Rosewood Gardens. Amelia's temporary solution was becoming my permanent reality, a gilded cage built with promises she had no intention of keeping. And the most painful part was the slow, dawning realization that she didn't even have the courage, or perhaps the decency, to tell me the truth. The 4 years that followed were a masterclass in endurance, a slow erosion of hope played out against the backdrop of institutional routine. Birthdays came and went, marked by a wilted cupcake and a strained, off-key rendition of Happy Birthday by whichever aide was on duty. Christmases were a sea of forced cheerfulness, the scent of pine-scented disinfectant failing to mask the underlying loneliness. Amelia's calls, when they came, were masterpieces of evasion. She'd talk about the weather, about some inconsequential office drama, about Leo's latest soccer triumph or Lily's budding artistic talents. Any mention of my returning home was met with a sigh, a vague promise of soon, Mom, we're just so swamped right now, or a gentle redirection of the conversation. Are you comfortable, Mom? Are they looking after you properly? She'd ask, her voice oozing a solicitude that felt as synthetic as the silk flowers in the residence lounge. Comfortable? Was one ever truly comfortable in a place that felt like a waiting room for the inevitable? Looked after? Yes, in a functional, impersonal way. My pills were dispensed, my meals delivered, my bed made. But my heart, my spirit, these were left to fend for themselves in the barren landscape of her neglect. It was Lena, a young activities coordinator with bright, kind eyes and a seemingly inexhaustible supply of patience, who inadvertently provided the key to unlocking the full extent of Amelia's deception. Lena had taken a shine to me, perhaps sensing the well of unspoken sadness beneath my polite, reserved exterior. She'd often stop by my room for a quick chat, bringing me a crossword puzzle or a new library book. She'd been trying, gently, to encourage me to engage more with the digital world, suggesting that a tablet might help me stay connected. You could video call Amelia, Mrs. Albright, she'd said, her optimism untainted by the reality of my daughter's indifference. See the grandchildren. I'd always demurred, the thought of navigating unfamiliar technology too daunting, the prospect of yet another rebuff too painful. But one afternoon, Lena arrived with a gently used tablet, a donation from a local community group. Just try it, Evelyn, she urged, using my first name with a familiarity that was surprisingly comforting. I'll help you set it up. We can look at pictures of kittens, or gardens, or whatever you like. Reluctantly, I agreed. Lena was patient, guiding my hesitant fingers across the smooth screen. She showed me how to search for things, how to look at news sites. And then, with an innocent, let's see if Amelia has any nice family photos online, she typed my daughter's name into a social media search bar. The page that loaded was a vibrant, glossy testament to a life I was clearly no part of. There was Amelia, beaming, tanned, on a sun-drenched beach, Mark's arm around her waist. The caption read, Paradise Found, #FamilyVaque, #blessed. There were photos of Leo and Lily, growing so fast, their faces alight with joy as they built sandcastles, splashed in turquoise water. Birthdays, holidays, school events, a whole tapestry of family life, meticulously documented, beautifully curated. And in not one single image, not one passing mention, was there any sign of me. My heart twisted. It was one thing to be absent from their lives. It was another to see that absence so cheerfully, so completely, erased from their public narrative. But the real blow came with a series of photos captioned New Beginnings, #Home Sweet Home. It was my bungalow, but different. The walls were a fashionable shade of gray I'd never have chosen. My comfortable, chintz armchair, Thomas's favorite, was gone, replaced by a sleek, minimalist sofa. The garden, my beloved roses, had been dug up, replaced by a stark, modern patio with angular furniture. Amelia and Mark were posing in my living room, champagne flutes raised in a toast, their smiles triumphant. They hadn't just put me in a home, they had moved into mine. They had erased me, not just from their present, but from my own past. Lena, beside me, gasped softly, "Oh, Evelyn, I had no idea." I couldn't speak. The betrayal was so profound, so audacious, it stole my breath. This wasn't just neglect. This was a deliberate, calculated usurpation. They were living my life, in my home, while I languished here, forgotten, dismissed as a temporary inconvenience that had become a permanent fixture in their carefully constructed narrative of filial duty fulfilled. The polite fiction I had clung to, that Amelia was just busy, that she still cared, that my return home was just around the corner, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The kindly, understanding mother in me died a quiet death that afternoon, replaced by a cold, hard anger, a dawning, terrible clarity. My daughter hadn't just forgotten me, she had actively, purposefully, written me out of her life, out of my own home, and replaced me with a version of herself that no longer included a mother who didn't fit her new, improved aesthetic. The discovery of Amelia and Mark living in my bungalow, redecorating it, effectively erasing my existence from its very walls, was a wound far deeper than any fractured hip. It was a betrayal that cut to the core of my identity, not just as a mother, but as a person who had built a life, a home, filled with memories they now so casually, so cruelly, discarded. For days, I was numb, moving through the routines of Rosewood Gardens like an automaton. The beige walls seemed to press in on me, the forced cheerfulness of the staff grating on my raw nerves. Lena, bless her heart, tried to comfort me, her young face etched with a sympathy that was both genuine and, I sensed, a little helpless. "Evelyn," she'd said, her hand resting gently on my arm, "this isn't right. There must be something you can do." But what could I do? I was an old woman, confined to a care home, my only link to the outside world a daughter who had proven herself to be a consummate liar and a thief of not just possessions, but of a life. It was Agnes, the retired paralegal from room 2B, who provided the first flicker of a different kind of fire. Agnes was a formidable woman, even in her 80s, her mind as sharp as a tack, her gaze missing nothing. She'd observed my deepening despair, my withdrawal from even the most cursory social interactions. One afternoon, she wheeled herself into my room, a determined glint in her eye. "All right, Evelyn," she announced, her voice raspy but firm, "out with it. You look like you've lost your last friend and found out the cat ran off with the pension. What's Amelia done now?" Her bluntness, so unexpected, startled a choked laugh out of me. And then, the story poured out, the temporary stay, the 4 years of silence, the social media revelation, the usurpation of my home. Agnes listened, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the armrest of her wheelchair. The unmitigated gall, she finally breathed, her eyes flashing. "Power of attorney, Evelyn. Did you ever sign anything giving Amelia power of attorney?" I frowned, trying to remember. There were papers after the fall. Amelia said they were just for the hospital, for Rosewood Gardens, so she could manage things while I was indisposed. I was in so much pain, so confused. I signed where she told me to. Agnes nodded slowly. "I thought as much. Standard operating procedure for the thoroughly unscrupulous. And your bank accounts, your pension? Do you know who's been accessing them?" A cold dread seeped into me. I hadn't even considered it. I'd always assumed my small monthly pension was being managed, perhaps even accumulating. The thought that Amelia might have been helping herself. I don't know, I stammered. "Amelia always handled the mail, said she didn't want me to worry about bills." "Convenient," Agnes snorted. "Right, Evelyn. First things first, we need to find out exactly what you signed, and what's been happening with your finances." "Lena," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong, as the young activities coordinator happened to be passing my door. Lena popped her head in, her expression curious. "Agnes, can you use your official Rosewood status to get Evelyn a copy of all the admission paperwork she signed? And perhaps a way to contact her bank, discreetly?" Lena looked from Agnes to me, her eyes wide with a dawning understanding. "Of course," she said, a new determination in her voice. "I'll see what I can do." Over the next few weeks, my small room became a clandestine command center. Agnes, with her years of legal experience, guided me, her questions sharp, her advice invaluable. Lena, our trusted go-between, managed to procure copies of the documents I'd signed, a sweeping, comprehensive power of attorney that gave Amelia almost unlimited control over my affairs. She also helped me make discreet inquiries with my bank. The news was devastating, but not entirely surprising. My savings account, the one Thomas and I had so carefully nurtured, was significantly depleted. Regular withdrawals, large sums, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Payments for items I'd never purchased, luxury goods, travel, even, it seemed, contributions towards the very renovations that had erased me from my own home. The anger that had been a cold, hard knot in my chest now burned with a righteous fury. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, systematic theft, a betrayal so profound it left me breathless. "She didn't just steal my home, Agnes," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sorrow. "She stole my security, my past, my future." Agnes patted my hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. "Yes, she did, Evelyn. And now, my dear, we're going to start the process of taking it back, or at the very least, making her pay for what she's done. It's time to call in the cavalry." The Cavalry, Agnes explained, was a non-profit legal aid service she'd volunteered for after her retirement, specializing in elder abuse cases. "They're good people, Evelyn," she said. "Tenacious. They don't like bullies. And your Amelia, my dear, sounds like a prize-winning bully." For the first time in 4 long years, a flicker of something other than despair ignited within me. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was resolve. A grim, determined resolve to fight, not just for my possessions, but for my dignity, for the woman I had been before Amelia decided I was an inconvenience to be discarded. The battle would be arduous, I knew, but with Agnes by my side, and Lena as our secret weapon, I was no longer alone. The call to justice for seniors, the legal aid service Agnes had recommended, was made by Lena from a payphone at a nearby shopping mall, a detail that added a touch of almost comical cloak and dagger to our serious endeavor. Agnes had coached me on what to say, how to present the facts concisely, without letting emotion overwhelm the narrative. The intake paralegal on the other end was patient, her questions incisive. An appointment was scheduled for the following week with a lawyer named Ms. Eleanor Vance, a name that resonated with a comforting solidity. The day Ms. Vance was due to visit Rosewood Gardens, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. Agnes, ever practical, had helped me choose my best cardigan, a soft lavender, and insisted I wear a touch of the rose-scented powder Thomas used to love. First impressions, Evelyn, she'd said. Let her see the dignified woman Amelia tried to erase, not a victim. Ms. Vance was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately inspired confidence. She listened intently as I, with Agnes occasionally interjecting to clarify a legal point or prompt a memory, recounted the past 4 years, the broken promises, the financial exploitation, the emotional devastation of being rendered invisible by my own child. I showed her the social media printouts Lena had carefully compiled, the copies of the power of attorney, the bank statements that painted such a damning picture of Amelia's avarice. Ms. Vance's expression remained impassive throughout my narrative, but I saw a flicker of something, anger, outrage, in her eyes when I described the supermarket incident, the casual cruelty of being introduced as a lady from the neighborhood. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. Mrs. Albright, she said finally, her voice calm but firm, what your daughter and her husband have done is not just morally reprehensible. It is, in several aspects, legally actionable. The misuse of a power of attorney for personal gain is a serious breach of fiduciary duty, and depending on the specifics of how they took possession of your home, there may be grounds for challenging that as well. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. To hear my suspicions, my pain, validated by a legal professional, to know that I wasn't just an embittered old woman imagining slights, but a victim of genuine wrongdoing, it was a powerful affirmation. What can we do? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Ms. Vance outlined a plan of action. First, an immediate revocation of the existing power of attorney, to be replaced by one appointing a trusted, independent third party, or even Ms. Vance herself, if I wished. Second, a formal demand for a full accounting of all my assets and expenditures handled by Amelia since the POA was enacted. Third, depending on the findings, legal proceedings to recover misappropriated funds and potentially, to contest the ownership or occupancy of my bungalow. This will not be a quick or easy process, Evelyn, Ms. Vance cautioned. Amelia and her husband will likely fight back, deny any wrongdoing. It could become unpleasant. Ms. Vance, I said, meeting her gaze directly, my newfound resolve hardening my voice, my life for the past 4 years has been unpleasant. I am no longer afraid of unpleasantness. I am afraid of dying with this injustice unaddressed, of allowing Amelia to believe she has gotten away with erasing me. Agnes, from her wheelchair, nodded in staunch approval. That's the spirit, Evelyn. We're with you every step of the way. Over the next few weeks, Ms. Vance moved with impressive speed. The POA was revoked. Formal letters, couched in anodyne legalese that nonetheless carried the unmistakable weight of impending consequence, were dispatched to Amelia and Mark, demanding a full financial accounting within 30 days. The silence from their end was, for a time, absolute. I imagined the panic, the frantic consultations with their own lawyers, the dawning realization that the temporary arrangement they had so comfortably settled into was about to unravel. Lena reported that Amelia's usually prolific social media presence had gone curiously quiet. No more glossy vacation photos, no more smug updates about their blessed life in my home. It was during this period of tense waiting that I made another crucial decision, one that felt like the final, definitive severing of a bond already corroded by betrayal. I asked Ms. Vance to help me draw up a new will. My previous will, drafted years ago when Thomas was still alive, had, of course, left everything to Amelia. That was no longer tenable. My legacy, I decided, would not be a reward for cruelty and exploitation. We discussed various options. A part of me, the grandmotherly part that still ached for Leo and Lily, wanted to ensure their future was secure. Ms. Vance suggested a trust, managed independently, for their education. I agreed, but the bulk of my estate, including the bungalow, if and when it was recovered, I decided would go to a cause that now resonated deeply with my own experience, Justice for Seniors, the very organization that was now fighting for me, and to a local hospice that had cared for Thomas with such compassion in his final days. It was a quiet act of defiance, a final assertion of my autonomy. My life, my assets, my story, they were mine to direct, mine to bequeath, and I would ensure they served a purpose greater than funding Amelia and Mark's next luxury vacation or home renovation. The old Evelyn, the one who patiently endured, who made excuses, who quietly absorbed the hurts, was fading. In her place, a new Evelyn was emerging, a woman steeled by injustice, empowered by a righteous anger, and determined to see this through to its rightful conclusion. The first tangible sign that Ms. Vance's letters had hit their mark arrived not as a contrite phone call or a letter of apology, but as a registered envelope addressed to Ms. Vance's office, a copy of which she promptly shared with me. It was from Amelia and Mark's newly retained lawyer, a Mr. Alastair Finch, whose letter had reeked of expensive paper and even more expensive hourly rates. The tone of the letter was a masterpiece of blustering indignation and veiled threats. It accused me of senile vindictiveness, of being unduly influenced by meddling third parties, a clear reference to Agnes and, presumably, Ms. Vance herself. It categorically denied any financial impropriety, claiming that all expenditures from my accounts had been for my direct benefit and care, including, laughably, the necessary upkeep and improvement of my bungalow to ensure it was suitable for my eventual return. Eventual return? After 4 years and a complete gutting and redecoration to their own trendy tastes? The audacity was breathtaking. They even had the gall to suggest that my current agitation was a symptom of my declining mental state, and that perhaps Amelia should repetition for guardianship for my own protection. Guardianship? Agnes snorted when I read her that particular passage. The nerve of that grasping harpy. She wants to lock you up and throw away the key, both literally and financially. Ms. Vance, however, remained unperturbed. Standard tactics, Evelyn, she said calmly during our next meeting at Rosewood. They're trying to intimidate you, to discredit you. Don't let it rattle you. Their bluster is a sign of weakness, not strength. They know they're on shaky ground, especially regarding the financial accounting. If they had nothing to hide, they'd have provided it by now. True to her prediction, the 30-day deadline for the accounting came and went with no substantive response, only another letter from Mr. Finch, filled with more obfuscation and requests for clarification on the scope and nature of our demands. He's stalling, Ms. Vance said, a grim smile playing on her lips, which tells me they're either scrambling to fabricate records, or they simply can't account for the money in any legitimate way. Either way, it strengthens our position. The next step was to file a formal legal complaint, petitioning the court for a full audit of my accounts and, if necessary, for the recovery of misappropriated assets. We also included a claim for undue influence regarding the power of attorney and, more contentiously, a challenge to their continued occupancy of my bungalow. This is where it gets serious, Evelyn, Ms. Vance cautioned. Once we file, it becomes a public record. There will be depositions, hearings. It could be a long and emotionally draining process. I took a deep breath. The thought of facing Amelia in a courtroom, of having our family's dirty linen aired so publicly, was daunting. But the alternative, to retreat, to allow her to win, to live out my remaining days as a victim, was unbearable. I understand, Ms. Vance, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. But I am ready. I've been silent for too long. The day the papers were officially served on Amelia and Mark, I felt a strange mixture of trepidation and a grim satisfaction. The ball was now well and truly in their court. Their reaction was swift and, frankly, uglier than I had anticipated. A few days later, Amelia appeared at Rosewood Gardens, unannounced, for the first time in 4 years. She didn't look like the glossy, confident woman from her social media photos. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed with a mixture of fury and a dawning, desperate fear. She bypassed the front desk, brushing past a startled Lena, and stormed into my room. Agnes, thankfully, was there, having her afternoon tea with me. Mother, Amelia began, her voice trembling with rage, how could you? Suing your own daughter? Trying to make us homeless? After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done to me, you mean? I countered, my voice surprisingly steady. Agnes, ever the pragmatist, calmly picked up the small call bell by my bedside. Amelia, I continued, you left me here for 4 years without a single visit. You moved into my home, disposed of my belongings, and helped yourself to my savings. What, precisely, did you expect me to do? Send you a thank you note? It was for your own good, she shrieked, her composure shattering. You weren't safe. The house was too much for you. And the money, we were just managing it, making sure it was there for your care. My care? I echoed, a humorless laugh escaping me. My care in this beige box, while you redecorated my home with my money and went on luxury vacations? Is that the kind of care you're referring to? Just then, two sturdy-looking orderlies, summoned by Agnes's discreet ringing of the call bell, appeared in the doorway. Amelia looked from them to me, her face a mask of impotent fury. "You'll regret this, mother," she hissed. "You'll die alone and unloved, and it will be your own damn fault." Then, she turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving a vibrating silence in her wake. Agnes let out a long, slow breath. "Well," she said, reaching for another biscuit, "that went about as expected. Nasty piece of work, that one. But you stood your ground, Evelyn. You stood your ground beautifully." I sank back into my chair, my heart pounding, but a strange sense of lightness filled me. The confrontation had been brutal, yes, but I had faced her. I had spoken my truth, and I hadn't crumbled. The fight was far from over, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was just getting started. The legal battle, as Ms. Vance had predicted, was a protracted and often unpleasant affair. Amelia and Mark, through their lawyer Mr. Finch, employed every delaying tactic in the book. They contested every motion, questioned every document, and attempted to paint me as a confused, vindictive old woman being manipulated by opportunistic third parties. There were depositions, grueling sessions where Mr. Finch's unctuous, insinuating questions tried to pick apart my memories, to twist my words, to make me doubt my own sanity. But with Ms. Vance by my side, her sharp intellect and unwavering support a constant shield, I held firm. I recounted the facts, clearly, calmly, repeatedly. The truth, I discovered, had a resilience all its own. The financial audit, when it was finally compelled by the court, was damning. It laid bare, in cold, hard numbers, the systematic draining of my accounts, the unauthorized expenditures, the blatant misuse of funds for their personal enrichment. Vacations, designer clothes, expensive restaurant meals, even payments towards Mark's golf club membership, all paid for with my money, under the guise of managing my affairs. The renovations to my bungalow, which they'd claimed were necessary safety improvements, were revealed to be extensive, costly cosmetic upgrades, a gourmet kitchen I would never cook in, a spa bathroom I would never use, a home office for Mark carved out of what had once been my beloved sewing room. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, Amelia and Mark's bluster began to crumble. Mr. Finch's letters became less aggressive, more conciliatory. There were hints of a settlement. Ms. Vance, however, advised caution. "They're feeling the pressure, Evelyn," she said. "But don't mistake desperation for remorse. We hold the strong hand. Let's not fold too early." The court eventually ruled decisively in my favor. The power of attorney was formally and irrevocably nullified. Amelia and Mark were ordered to repay a significant portion of the misappropriated funds, not all of it, as some expenditures were too nebulously documented, but enough to make a substantial difference to my future, and a significant dent in theirs. More importantly, the court recognized my rightful ownership of the bungalow and ordered them to vacate the premises within 90 days. The victory was bittersweet. There was no joy in seeing my daughter and her husband brought so low, in knowing that their greed had led them to such a public humiliation, but there was a profound sense of justice, of vindication. I had fought for my dignity, for my rights, and I had won. The question now was, what to do next? The thought of returning to the bungalow, to the house that held so many memories of Thomas, but which had also been the stage for Amelia's profound betrayal, was complicated. Could I ever feel truly at home there again, knowing what had transpired within its walls? Agnes, practical as ever, had her own views. "Sell it, Evelyn," she advised. "Sell the blasted house. Let some other family make new memories there. You deserve a fresh start, a place untainted by all this unpleasantness." Lena, on the other hand, was more sentimental. "But it's your home, Evelyn," she said softly. "Your roses might be gone, but the roots are still there. Maybe you could replant them, make it yours again." I spent many sleepless nights wrestling with the decision. In the end, it was Sarah, my dear, unassuming nurse, who inadvertently helped me find clarity. She wasn't privy to the full extent of my legal battles, only knowing that I was having some family difficulties. But one afternoon, as she was checking my medication, she said, "You know, Martha, my little Ben is starting school next year. We live in a tiny rented apartment, and I do worry about him not having a proper yard to play in, a stable place to call home. But we make the best of it. Home isn't just bricks and mortar, is it? It's where the love is." Her words, so simple, so true, struck a chord. Home is where the love is. And the love I had once poured into that bungalow had been soured, tainted by betrayal. Perhaps Agnes was right. Perhaps a fresh start was what I needed. I made my decision. I would sell the bungalow. The proceeds, combined with the recovered funds from Amelia, would be more than enough for me to live comfortably, and to ensure my new will, the one that honored kindness and integrity, could be fully realized. I wouldn't be returning to a life of solitude in a house haunted by ghosts. I would be stepping into a new chapter, one of my own making, a chapter filled with purpose, and perhaps, a different kind of peace. The sale of the bungalow was handled efficiently by a no-nonsense estate agent Ms. Vance recommended. It sold quickly, to a young family with small children whose delighted laughter, I hoped, would soon fill the rooms and chase away the lingering shadows of Amelia and Mark's occupancy. I didn't attend the closing, nor did I wish to see the house one last time. My memories of it, the happy ones with Thomas, were safely locked in my heart. The rest, I was content to let go. With the proceeds, and the funds recovered from Amelia, I was suddenly in a position I hadn't been in for many years, financially secure, with choices. The first choice was an easy one, to move out of Rosewood Gardens. While Agnes and Lena had made my stay there bearable, even occasionally pleasant, it would forever be associated with the darkest period of my life. I found a lovely, light-filled apartment in a small, well-managed retirement community on the other side of town. It had a little balcony where I could grow herbs and a few cherished rose cuttings Lena had carefully propagated for me from a community garden. It wasn't the bungalow, but it was mine, a fresh slate, unmarred by betrayal. Agnes, bless her, decided to move too, taking an apartment in the same complex. "Can't let you have all the fun, Evelyn," she'd cackled. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't get taken in by any more charming charlatans." Her gruff affection was a comfort. Lena, though sad to see us leave Rosewood, promised regular visits, and I knew she would keep her word. My new will, the one that so decisively excluded Amelia and favored justice for seniors and the hospice, remained firmly in place. But I did make one small codicil. The educational trust for Leo and Lily, my grandchildren, I increased it slightly. They were innocent in all of this, and whatever their parents' failings, they deserved a chance at a good future. It was an act of grandmotherly love, untainted by the bitterness of their mother's betrayal. The question of Amelia herself was more complex. After the court judgment, she had disappeared from my life as completely as if she'd never existed. There were no calls, no letters, no attempts at apology or reconciliation. I heard, through the grapevine, Mrs. Henderson, naturally, that she and Mark had been forced to downsize significantly, that their once glossy lifestyle had taken a considerable hit. There was a part of me, the wounded mother part, that felt a grim satisfaction at this news. But mostly, I just felt a profound sadness for the daughter I had lost, for the woman she had become. One afternoon, several months after I'd settled into my new apartment, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was unfamiliar, the postmark from a small, distant town I'd never heard of. It was from Amelia. It wasn't an apology, not in the way I might have once hoped for. There were no expressions of remorse for the years of neglect, for the financial exploitation, for the emotional cruelty. Instead, it was a short, almost curt, note, informing me that she and Mark had divorced. He had left her, she wrote, for a younger woman, taking most of their remaining assets with him. She was now living alone, working a low-paying job, struggling to make ends meet. The letter ended not with a plea for help, but with a single, stark question: "Are you happy now, Mother?" I read the letter several times, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within me. Happy? No, happiness was too simple a word for the quiet, hard-won peace I had found. Was I satisfied that she was suffering? A small, shameful part of me perhaps felt a flicker of grim justice. But mostly, I felt nothing. Her life, her choices, her misfortunes, they were no longer my concern, no longer my burden to carry. I did not reply to her letter. There was nothing left to say. My silence, once a symptom of my pain and powerlessness, was now a conscious choice, a boundary, a final, quiet assertion of my independence. My life was my own now, to live as I saw fit, to fill with the things that brought me peace, my small garden, my books, the companionship of true friends like Agnes and Lena, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that my legacy, when the time came, would honor the values I held dear. The temporary stay at Rosewood Gardens had indeed been temporary, but not in the way Amelia had intended. It had been a temporary sojourn in a particular kind of hell, a crucible that had burned away the illusions, the false hopes, the unreciprocated maternal obligations, leaving behind something stronger, something truer, something undeniably, authentically, me. Life in my new apartment, with Agnes just a floor below and Lena's cheerful visits a regular highlight, settled into a comfortable, unhurried rhythm. I joined a book club at the community center, discovered a surprising talent for watercolor painting, something I'd never had the time or confidence to explore before, and spent many peaceful hours on my small balcony, tending my herbs and roses, the scent a fragrant reminder of Thomas and the simple joys of our life together. The pain of Amelia's betrayal had not vanished entirely, of course. It lingered, a dull ache in the background of my days, a scar on my heart that would likely never fully fade. But it no longer defined me. It no longer consumed me. I had faced it, fought it, and emerged, not unscathed, but whole. My involvement with justice for seniors became a quiet passion. I couldn't offer legal expertise, like Agnes, but I could offer my story, my experience. I volunteered to speak to other seniors who had faced similar situations, sharing not just the pain of elder abuse, but the possibility of reclaiming one's dignity, one's autonomy. It was a way of transforming my own suffering into something constructive, something that might help others navigate their own dark passages. Sarah Jennings, my dear nurse, whose uncalculated kindness had been the catalyst for such profound change in my life, remained a cherished friend. She visited often, bringing little Ben, now a bright, chattering schoolboy, whose innocent affection was a balm to my soul. I watched them together, her patient love for her son a quiet testament to the best of motherhood, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my decision regarding my will had been the right one. She never once mentioned the inheritance that would one day be hers. Her friendship, her concern, remained as genuine, as unmaterialistic, as it had been from the very beginning. She was a rare soul, a reminder that true wealth lies not in possessions, but in the quality of one's character. Occasionally, I would hear snippets of news about Amelia, usually through Mrs. Henderson, who, despite my move, still considered me a prime recipient for neighborhood gossip. Amelia was apparently still struggling, working a series of temporary jobs, her once glamorous life a distant memory. There was no mention of her ever attempting to contact me again after that one bitter letter. I felt a distant, detached pity for her, for the emptiness of a life built on such shallow foundations. She had traded her mother's love, her children's grandmother, her own integrity, for a fleeting illusion of status and wealth, and now, it seemed, she was left with nothing but the ashes of those choices. Leo and Lily, my grandchildren, remained a quiet ache in my heart. The educational trust was in place, their futures secured in that small way, but the personal connection, the grandmotherly bond one had so yearned for, seemed an impossibility, at least for now. Perhaps one day, when they were older, they might seek me out, might want to know the story of the grandmother their mother had tried to erase. If that day ever came, I would be ready, my heart open, but my guard, wisely, still up. My legacy, I knew, was not just in the legal documents safely lodged with Ms. Vance. It was in the quiet strength I had found, in the dignity I had reclaimed, in the choice I had made to honor kindness above all else. It was in the roses blooming on my balcony, a small, defiant splash of color against the urban landscape. It was in the laughter I shared with Agnes, the comforting presence of Lena, the innocent joy of Ben's visits. It was in the knowledge that I had faced betrayal and emerged, not bitter, but stronger, wiser, and, in my own quiet way, victorious. The 4 years I had spent in the beige wilderness of Rosewood Gardens, the years Amelia had intended as a temporary prelude to my quiet demise and her own enrichment, had instead become the crucible in which a new version of myself had been forged. A woman who understood, finally, that her worth was not dependent on her daughter's approval, that her love was not a resource to be plundered, and that her silence, once a shield of pained endurance, could also be a sort of profound, unshakable peace. Temporary, Amelia had called it, and in a way, she was right. My suffering had been temporary. My strength, however, was proving to be remarkably, enduringly, permanent.